Hey, everybody, welcome back to Your Inside Track to Success. As always, I'm your host, Stuart Cranes. We have another amazing guest for you this week, but before I go ahead and introduce her, please take a moment to like, subscribe, especially if you're catching this on Spotify. Please leave a 5-star review. It just helps the show become more relevant in the search function of that platform. Want to make sure that the people, the wisdom, the nuggets are spread as far and wide as possible. This is a free show, so just do us a solid and make sure that the messaging herein is spread as far as it can possibly go. So without further ado, I want to introduce this week's guest. She is somebody that I think embodies kind of that loving, endearing spirit, but is a champion of passing forward emotional intelligence training and coaching onto younger generations. She has several years of experience. Actually, that's not even doing it a service. She has a lot of experience in transformational coaching settings and is the founder and executive director of the SOAR Foundation, which aims to bring this type of emotional intelligence work to youth so that it can be passed forward in future generations. So without further ado, I want to introduce Debbie Martinez to the show. Debbie, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course, and thank you for being here today. And so we are both graduates of, emotional intelligence trainings, done a lot of coaching, been coached a lot by a lot of people. I would love to just have you jump in, tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this work, getting the SOAR Foundation started.
Absolutely. My work with children predates any of the experience I've had with formal emotional intelligence training. I've been a champion of creating space for children my entire adult life. Um, I created a performing arts education program at an independent theater in Palos Verdes, California, and ran that for 14 years. And the basis of that entire program was teaching young people life skills and tools to navigate their lives in this very complicated social world that we live in. Because my philosophy has always been you create great human beings and great things happen in the world. And
Yeah.
these and that doesn't matter whether it's on stage or if I have many kids that are out there in the world really creating beautiful results as journalists, as therapists, as real estate developers, as in all sorts of corporate situations. And their takeaway from that program was that they've learned compassion and empathy, and they learned what being able to create community and team and responsibility for each other look like, what conflict resolution and being able to adapt to new situations. And so when COVID happened, I produced youth theater and did education for performing arts for 25 years. And when COVID happened, theater died. And I thought, maybe it's time for me to retire. And then I tried that on for about 20 seconds and it wasn't a good look on me. And so I thought, if I'm going to do something moving forward, what is that going to look like? Because I want to remain in service. I wanted to make a difference. And so I started talking to mental health professionals and education professionals, parents interviewing children during that time. And it was heartbreaking what was happening as far as kids isolating and depression and stress and anxiety and all those transitions that kids need in order to continue to grow emotionally, and everything was missing. And I came up with this formula for SOAR, and I thought, why can't, as I had been using theater as a vehicle to teach emotional intelligence for all those years, what would it look like for me to condense those lessons and be intentional about putting them into 2-day workshops? And that did come from the last 10, 11, 12 years that I have been in emotional intelligence work. I completed a lot of training that I've done on that and MITT in Los Angeles. I continued doing that when I moved to Columbus, even prior to moving to Columbus with Next Level. And you're right, I've been coaching and staffing programs, facilitating programs, for a long time in that area. So combining those two worlds that I lived in, theater and emotional intelligence, really helped facilitate forming this company of SOAR. And I got a tremendous amount of support from all of those areas that I just mentioned. The result of that has been magical. Bringing students together, whether it's standalone trainings or going into group organizations, and watching children start to own their voices again and step into their power and see what compassion and empathy feels like in their body, not just what the definition of those words are, is humbling and inspiring for me to watch that process, to be able to open up space for them and hold space where they feel safe and they feel like they can step into vulnerability. And that's hard for adults, right, Stuart?
Yeah,
For
certainly
any of
can be.
us, right? Trusting that we can trust our hearts and trust our most sacred fears and pain and those things with someone else, and that not be used in a way that's going to hurt us is
Sure.
hard for adults and definitely hard for kids.
Yeah.
And so being able to open that space up in these workshops has been a beautiful thing.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. And I kind of want to take this maybe a little bit derivative for where you and I have a full understanding of it. But
Yeah.
for the folks listening to this who maybe have not heard of emotional intelligence, it has been a buzzword. I know the Harvard Business Review a couple years back posted a collection of articles on emotional intelligence. My experience is it was more like intellectualizing it as a concept. So I was wondering if you could just explain what emotional intelligence is and perhaps how it differs from like traditional therapy.
Right, because I'm not a therapist, and nor are the people that have taught me emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, for me, in my experience, has been me learning to navigate my life in a way that serves myself, serves my family, serves my community. And that entails skills in conflict resolution, skills in communication, skills in creating community around us, skills in allowing vulnerability, taking responsibility for my life, taking responsibility for what I create, whether it's good or bad in my life. And we all have a little bit of that, of both of those things in our life. Yeah, emotional intelligence to me is really enriching my life so that I can serve other people. Because if I'm not grounded and if I don't feel good about myself, I can't really pass anything else on to other people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you explain it like that. And in the coaching I do, a lot of it is just taking like a clear objective view of how I'm showing up in the world, how my clients are showing up in the world,
Yeah.
and not taking our failures as personal, like as a personal reflection of us as human being, but just as objective feedback that we can use to change how we're showing up in the world, change how we're acting upon whatever goal that we may be pursuing that isn't quite going the way that we want it to. And I'm grateful for this work because before I had it, I was the type of person who didn't take responsibility for my feelings, didn't really take responsibility for how I showed up in relationships with people. And, it isn't for the faint of heart. It does require some rewiring, reprogramming of how you are viewing the world, the lens that you're looking at through. But I got to tell you, I would not be the person I am today without stepping into this work. And so I think it's wonderful that you're working with youth to get them these skills at such an early age.
Yeah, I love that word that you used, courage, Stuart, because it's not for the faint of heart. And I remember going through a process early on in my work with emotional intelligence where I was given feedback from strangers, from people that didn't know me, that never met me. And 15 minutes into a segment, I kept getting feedback that I showed up as a victim, as a victim, as a victim. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't show up as a victim. I'm sure I don't. But I was getting that feedback from, 8, 10, 12 strangers. And it did cause me pause and say, you know, maybe I'm not seeing myself clearly. And maybe I'm not seeing the way that I show up and the way that I impact other people. So, what would it look like if I opened myself up to that feedback and took a really good look at why they're saying those things, And when I did, I realized that, first of all, they had a point. Sometimes when we work really hard to cover up what we're feeling inside, it just makes it manifests it in a bigger way as far as the way we show up. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
yeah. And so I did have all of that victim stuff that I thought I was handling beautifully. And so my point in that is that it took courage for me to step into that and accept that feedback and thank them for that, because it changed the way that I showed up in the world, and it was allowed me to take responsibility for those things. And so when I say I appreciate that word courage, when I step into a room with a room full of kids from 11 to 17 years old, the courage that it takes for them to open themselves up and allow me to throw things at them that they're completely unfamiliar with, and them embrace those exercises and laugh and cry and have a great time, and also in that process create connection with people. That's I don't you find that that's what I have, the feedback I've gotten from the public, from mental health professionals and education and parents, is that connection is something that's really missing in the world now. And and that's everything. Connection is everything. Without that, nothing else works. And so teaching children early on, a lot of people don't learn that till they're adults. I had a presenter that just worked with me recently on a workshop, and I always have presenters come in on an exercise prior to their segment going into an exercise, and he was in a extremely emotional vulnerability circle with these children. And yeah, so he said he didn't get that kind of vulnerability training till he was in the university. And
Mhm.
he said, I can't even imagine what my life would have looked like if I would have gotten that kind of training as a child. And I know you and I have both heard over and over again when we've done adult trainings, people saying, I can't even imagine what my life would have looked like if we had gotten this training when we were children. And
Mhm.
I think that that's the point right now. Our world is upside down, and it doesn't matter what side of the fence anybody is on, our world is upside down. And these children are our hope for what's going to happen in the future, and giving them the skills to navigate this world and navigate their lives and navigate their families is so important. Um, and have them feel like they have some power, that they own their voices, they can step into power, that they can create the life that they want for themselves, no matter what circumstance they come from. Those things are really important. And it's the things that I've been seeing, the results that I've been seeing over and over again in these workshops.
Yeah, and I love that you shared that. And there are multiple times in my life looking back that I wish I had these skills. And it's interesting that you use an example of somebody who didn't really attain these skills until college. I look back at my college experience and knowing what I know now, it's because of how I showed up that I really don't have hardly any relationships from my college years still intact. And, I think we are so often wanting to point the finger at other people, like, oh, so and so, just fell off the earth, or, so and so was rude to me that one time, and that's why I don't talk to them. But in reality, like looking at it, I was not exactly someone that you would want to hang out with. I was, kind of a wet blanket, just living in a place of victimhood, always, talking negatively, probably had depression if I really want to look at it, but not at all aware of how I was showing up and that I wasn't giving anything that people would want to latch on to.
And to be fair, Stuart, I think that there are some people that are naturally extremely charismatic and, have that personality that walk into a room and everyone's their friend. But I also feel strongly that creating creating relationships and creating community is a skill set. It takes courage. Um, it takes a certain amount of finesse. It takes being vulnerable. You know, um, People so often feel like vulnerability is a weakness. And what we teach in SOAR is that it's absolutely a strength. Because if you can't be vulnerable with someone, there's no way that they can be vulnerable with you, i.e., authentic relationships aren't created in that scenario, right? And but that fear of being vulnerable and being judged and being rejected, or being abandoned because people see a weakness in us and everything, is a strong driving force. And so I think, being fair, creating relationships and community isn't natural for a lot of people. And so having skills to be able to do that is really important.
Yeah. And earlier in this conversation, you talked about how just hard it is in general to create like meaningful, authentic communication, which again, the irony is we all got a phone like this in our pockets, but with unlimited ways, I should say, to communicate with people, the quality of our communications is at an all-time low. And I have found in my experience using this type of work, working to repair and mend relationships, I find that when I am the first to be vulnerable with somebody, it gives them permission to open themselves up to me. And then that's when actual, meaningful, authentic communication occurs. And I'm wondering if you have anything to add to that, whether it's from your own experience or elsewhere.
Absolutely, 100%. Um, I have a rule with SOAR because people ask all the time when I go in with groups, if it's in a school or if it's in another organization, um, can we have adults from that organization in the room? And first of all, no one can ever come in and just observe, a process
Sure.
like this. But there have been times when I have allowed that. But the way I've allowed it is that the adults become part of the process. And so they become part of the exercises. And anything that's asked of the children is also asked of the adults. And even when I bring in presenters, like I just talked about and everything, we start those vulnerability exercises off with the adults in the circle, or the interns that I have an intern program where students come back and support trainings as well. Leadership in the training starts with a vulnerability story from their lives, or from an experience that they've had. And what that does in the room for the kids is it breaks the space wide open, because if the adults in the room allow themselves that, the kids feel safe being able to do that as well, because they're not accustomed to adults allowing themselves to be vulnerable around them. We all think we need to be strong, and set an example. And that creates a feeling of safety for kids if we don't show them that vulnerability. And I find completely the opposite. It creates a level of humanity that maybe they don't see in their day-to-day lives, with adults. And then they find that vulnerability with each other, and they realize that even if, like, I go into dance studios sometimes with competition teams that work together 6 days a week, 3 or 4 hours a day. Those kids are in the room together. And when we go through a weekend with SOAR, they realize they seldom look at each other in the eye. Like you said, it's phones, or they find ways to divert because it's uncomfortable to look at each other, right? They find that they don't really know each other. They find that when they have problems with each other, they don't realize that they have more in common than not. And through all of the exercises and the things that we do, those are the discoveries that we make. And when we find that we're all more like each other than not, it does open up space, right? For relationships to be created, because it takes fear out of it. It takes fear out of creating those relationships.
And so I know, Debbie, that we're talking about, trainings. We're talking about like an intentional container, a space that,
Yeah.
you are creating through the SOAR Foundation. But how can anybody listening to this, but particularly the parents,
Yeah.
practice this in their homes?
I definitely think putting technology away for a certain amount of the day, even if it's an hour, where families get to really see each other and hear each other, is really important. That's a joke that we make, but it's real. Is that how many have you ever texted someone that you're standing right next to and could have spoken
Oh,
actual words to? And
I'm guilty of that.
it's a real thing. It happens. So putting technology away, but also um, opening up space for conversations. How was your day at school? Fine. Great. And parents walk away. It was fine, right? Um, what did you do at school today? Nothing. Okay. And you walk away. The reality is that something is always there, whatever that looks like, good, bad, neutral, whatever that is. But really creating space so that conversations about friends, about issues that are coming up in their lives, and really seeing those kids and really listening. Um, I think that that's hard for parents because we're all on overload ourselves and overwhelmed. And
Yeah.
it's easier to um, just kind of overlook or brush aside things that are actually really important to them.
Yeah.
And noticing when there's changes with our kids. A kid that maybe is very happy and makes good grades all of a sudden becomes, more reclusive and isolates in their room, or their grades are dropping, or friends that they had aren't showing up in their lives. Something's going on, but we get to notice those things, and that means slowing our lives down some and grounding ourselves. Um, Kids will follow our lead, and so however we show up, we're going to see a mirror of that in the kids in our lives.
Yeah, I going back to the idea of feedback, our children are giving us feedback all the time. And I think it requires us to really be willing to look at ourselves in the mirror and not react out of anger or frustration or anything of the like, and still show up as the parent that they need in the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to look anybody in the eye and say I'm perfect by any means. I think one of the things I struggle with the most as a step parent is that I work from home. Everything I
Mm-hmm.
do is from home on a laptop, which is great, except that when Tucker, my stepson, comes home from school and he wants to show me something, I'm still in the middle of my workday and there's a big
Mm-hmm.
blur of boundaries. But what I try to do is when he comes in to show me something, at least give him the service of turning towards him and looking at him when he's trying to share something with me or ask me a question, because it matters. And maybe even if I'm not able to drop everything for whatever he wants or needs, at least he can feel like he's heard and that what he has to say matters.
Absolutely. And we can't, first of all, nobody gave us the manual, right?
No,
of all the
they
right
sure
ways to
did
do
not.
everything. So we're all going to mess it up at some point. Usually more than once or twice, right? Um, so I think just acknowledging that none of us are going to do it right, whatever that looks like in any given family all the time. But also, you know, I think the way that you just described your relationship with Tucker is a really good example. If you stop for just a second and say, I can't do this right now, but I promise I will do it XYZ, whatever that looks like. And then hold to that. Remember that you said that, and everything. That's really all they need. They need to be seen. You're exactly right. Kids need to feel heard. They need to feel seen. They need to feel safe. And it doesn't take a lot from us for those things to happen, but our lives are so busy. Sometimes it doesn't happen too often, you know.
Yeah. Again, going back to being bombarded all the time on our phones, like I think being present to what we're allowing in can actually open us up to be more intentional. Like, do you need every single app on your phone to be shooting you a notification that so and so liked your post? Or if you have a game on your phone, like they've given you like X number of more spins on whatever
Yeah.
thing is happening. And, decluttering our attention so that we can give more of it to the people that matter does create the community, the relationships that we're looking for in our lives.
Yeah, and I think that that's also important as far as when you said what can parents do that maybe haven't had formal emotional intelligence training and everything. I think stopping and noticing. Just stop and notice and then do something proactive after you do that, whatever that looks like. And that's across the board. It doesn't always mean if the child is having a problem. If they've had a great day, stop and notice how we respond to those things. If we take that for granted because they're a good kid, you know. Yeah, so I think the best advice I can give to parents is to stop and notice and then really take time to respond to whatever's going on with our kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this isn't just for parents, it's also for anybody in any type of relationship, romantic
100%.
relationship, relations with your parents, relations with your siblings, coworkers, colleagues. A little bit of
100%.
attention goes a long way, y'all.
It does. And by giving kids these tools early on, guess what? They're going to raise children that have those tools. So it's a ripple effect. And but what I've also when I started this program, Stuart, I did some research, of course, into what else was available out there. And there is a tremendous amount of information available to what's wrong and the problems that COVID created and issues that children are having in school and with their families and with their friends. But there's not programming. There's therapy available if you can get in to see a therapist. That's another thing that COVID created, is that there's long waiting lines to get in to see a therapist with a child. There's not programming available. And so I would love for SOAR not to be one of the very few programs available, because it's a big world. There's a lot of children out there, and I want to try to reach as many as I possibly can. But I would love that to be a movement so that kids all all over the world had access to this, what would our world look like
Yeah.
if that was possible?
Yeah, and I want the folks to hear, like, just like anything else in life, information alone doesn't change behavior. Information alone doesn't change the outcomes, but getting the practice, getting the repetition, the tools, so to speak, on how to change the way we view ourselves
Yeah.
and the world is how we actually make change. I mean, if information did it alone, we would all be millionaires with six packs and none of us would smoke cigarettes, quite frankly.
Right. Yeah. A
But
good point, because yes, it's great that I want this movement to happen for children, but how can parents, again, best serve their children? Find a program that they can dig into some emotional intelligence work. Find a place where they can give themselves more tools and more information in order to navigate their own lives. It's going to do nothing but serve them and everyone around them, their children, their families, their coworkers, all of that. So I encourage adults to do this work as well. It's going to continue. It's going to continue to snowball down the hill, if we have more and more and more people that care about emotional intelligence and the difference that it makes in their lives. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I love that. And since we're here, Debbie, how can people get connected with you? How can they talk to you, learn more about the SOAR Foundation?
I have a pretty comprehensive website. Um, it's at www.soarwithconfidence.com. And on the website, there's contact information from myself and my team. And yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone about SOAR or their organization and how SOAR could best serve their organization, or standalone trainings in any city. I've been in Oregon now, and Columbus and Los Angeles, and looking at trainings in Mississippi and Georgia
Wow.
as well. And so I'm pretty excited about where we're going. My goal is to be a truly national program, to be able to do these trainings simultaneously, have a bigger team. I've got a big vision for this company. I want the company to outlive me, which um, is important to me. And so being able uh, to create opportunities for people to get involved in this work is important to me as well. And so, yeah, I'm excited about what's happening right now with SOAR.
I love it. And we're going to be sure to put the link to the SOAR Foundation in the notes section of this episode. So if you're catching this on Spotify or YouTube, you can go ahead and find that, check that out, connect with Debbie, learn more, possibly bring this to your city, or at least get your child signed up so that they can really learn how to navigate the world in a way that I think at least our regular school system doesn't seem to teach most of us these days. So Debbie, I want to transition a little bit. You've been kind of hinting at something that I just want to ask you about directly. You keep saying that through doing this work, children are able to basically become their fullest, best selves in the world. Same thing with parents, they're able to change the way they orient themselves around their children, the world around them. And it all sounds to me like making the world a better place, which to me is legacy. So I would just
Mm,
love to hear from you what you feel legacy means to you if you're building this foundation to outlive yourself.
I feel like I do have a living legacy already out there as far as kids are concerned. I've been working, as I said in the beginning of this podcast, that I've been working with children for my entire adult life, creating safe space for them. Um, and I did that. I want to be completely transparent. I think people do things for certain reasons. I am a survivor of sexual abuse as a child. And I know how important it is for kids to always feel like they have a safe space to be in and to go to. And I've been doing that, like I said, for my entire adult life in different formats. And so I do get messages from kids that I've worked with, since I was 20 years old, telling me that they remember the impact that whatever work we were doing had on their lives and how they passed it forward. I continue to get those messages from kids that have gone through my theater program. And now I'm in this new process with SOAR. And so I'd like my legacy to be that I never gave up. I never said that was enough, that I'm done, that I've accomplished what I was sent here to do. I want to continue to be a driving force to make a difference in this world. And the way that I feel like my gift is that I can do that is the way that I impact children. And my programming impacts children. And so I want to continue to do that as long as I can. And I would like my legacy to be that I just never stopped and that it continues to show up generation after generation with whatever work those people do in the world. One thing I failed to mention earlier is that SOAR is now a nonprofit. I was able to get our nonprofit status as of February in this year. So we're a brand new nonprofit and figuring out how to make that work and to grow this business and this work and everything. And that's something else that people can find on the website is ways that they can support SOAR and this business and these children that we're working with.
Again, y'all, Debbie is somebody that lives and breathes this work. And Debbie is somebody that I have seen parents that I know and trust their children to come and provide this training, provide these tools, and just getting to see those children live and learn and continue to develop out in the world better off for the experience. And so I definitely encourage you all to check out the website, see how you can get involved, see how possibly you can get your child in a SOAR training coming up, whether it's one that's actively going or possibly even bring it to your city. And so, folks, we are running towards the end of the show here. So, friendly reminder, if you got any value from today's episode, which I'm sure you did, please like, subscribe. Again, if you're on Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. It actually takes less than 2 seconds to do so, but it just helps these conversations be found by more people in the search functions. And so before we wrap up, Debbie, I just want to acknowledge you for your heart and the way that you give away your love, intention, and energy to people for whom that I think the fruit of the seeds that you're planting, you will not probably live to see, but showing up and doing it anyway.
Thank
And so,
you.
of course, and so as we wind this down, I ask this of all of the guests. What are you acknowledging yourself for today?
I'm acknowledging myself for finding joy each day that I wake up and get to continue to do things that make me happy, that impact other people. I'm acknowledging myself for being brave about doing a podcast, which I've never done before.
Woo, let's go.
Yeah, I'm just acknowledging myself for continuing to be afraid a lot of times and doing it anyway.
So thank you all for listening again this week. I'm your host, Stuart Cranes. This has been your Inside Track to Success. We will be back next Wednesday with another awesome interview or message designed to help you up-level your life. We'll see you then.